Some people say that hatred is the heaviest burden a heart can carry, yet Damien Rhodes wore his like armor. At 37, he had conquered the technology world with an intensity that left rivals trembling and investors celebrating. His company, Rhodes Innovations, had transformed from a struggling startup into a global empire worth billions. But success had not softened him. If anything, it had sharpened the edges of a man already carved from stone and steel. Tonight, standing in his corner office on the 52nd floor of the Rhodes Tower in Manhattan, Damien watched the city lights flicker below like fallen stars. The view was magnificent, the office pristine, and his bank account overflowing. Yet the emptiness inside him remained vast and untouchable. 17 years had passed since his father's company collapsed, 17 years since his father died of a broken heart, but the anger still burned as fresh as yesterday's wound. The cleaning crew worked silently around him, invisible hands maintaining his perfect world. He never noticed them, never cared to. They were simply part of the machinery that kept his life running smoothly. Until tonight, when a woman with honey-colored hair and exhausted green eyes knocked softly on his door. Nora Bennett had learned long ago that survival meant staying invisible. At 29, she moved through the world like a ghost, working herself to the bone while raising her 7-year-old son alone. Her days started at 5 in the morning and ended near midnight, a brutal cycle of cleaning offices, waiting tables, and stocking shelves at a convenience store. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford, not when Oliver needed new shoes, not when rent was due, not when life demanded every ounce of strength she possessed. She entered the executive office with her cleaning cart, expecting to find it empty as usual. Instead, she found him. The man looked like he belonged in a magazine, all sharp jawline and expensive suit, but his eyes held something darker. When those eyes landed on her, she felt the temperature in the room drop. "Your name," Damien said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Nora Bennett, sir." She kept her voice steady, professional, even as something in his expression made her stomach twist. The name hit him like a physical blow. Bennett. Thomas Bennett's daughter. The man who had systematically destroyed his father's manufacturing company, embezzling millions before disappearing into the night. Damien's father, a good man who had built everything from nothing, had died 6 months after the discovery. The heart attack had been swift, but Damien knew it was the betrayal that killed him. Thomas Bennett had been his father's closest friend, his most trusted advisor, and his murderer. "Thomas Bennett was your father," Damien said, each word precise and cold. Nora's face went pale. "He was. He died 9 years ago." "Not soon enough," Damien replied, watching her flinch. "Get out of my office." "Sir, I just need to clean." "I'll be quick and quiet, I promise." "I said get out." He moved closer, and she could see the fury burning in his dark eyes. "You have 10 seconds before I call security." Nora's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with a courage born of desperation. "Mr. Rhodes, I need this job. Please. Whatever you think about my father, I had nothing to do with it. I was 12 years old when he left. He abandoned my mother and me with nothing but debts and shame. We lost everything." "Good," Damien said viciously. "Then you understand what my family went through. Your father destroyed us. He stole everything we had and then ran like the coward he was. My father died because of him. My mother spent her last years in poverty because of him. And now his daughter stands in my building, breathing my air, asking for mercy she has no right to expect." Tears burned behind Nora's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "My father's sins aren't mine to carry. My mother worked herself to death trying to pay back what he stole. She died when I was 20, worn out and broken. I've been working ever since, trying to give my son the life I never had. So if you want to punish someone, punish me, but know that I've already paid for his crimes every single day of my life." The mention of a child gave Damien pause, but only briefly. "Fire you?" He laughed, a sound without humor. No, I have a better idea. You said you need this job. How badly? Nora swallowed hard. Desperately. Then I'm offering you a position. My personal assistant. You'll be available whenever I need you, day or night. You'll do exactly as I say, without question or complaint. In return, I'll pay you 3 times your current salary from all 3 jobs combined. Enough that you can quit the others and actually sleep at night. She stared at him, understanding immediately that this was not kindness. This was strategy, a carefully planned revenge. Why would you do that? Damien's smile was cruel and beautiful. Because firing you would be too easy, too quick. I want you close, where I can watch you suffer. Where I can remind you every single day of what your family owes mine. I want to see you struggle under the weight of your father's legacy, just as I've struggled under the weight of my father's death. Nora felt trapped, caught between impossible choices. The money he offered would transform Oliver's life. She could afford proper healthcare, good food, maybe even save for his education. She could give him everything she had never had. But the price was her dignity, her peace of mind, perhaps even her sanity. When do I start? She asked quietly. Tomorrow. 8 o'clock sharp. Don't be late, Miss Bennett. He turned away from her, dismissing her as easily as one might swat away an insect. Nora left his office with her heart pounding and her mind racing. She had just agreed to work for a man who hated her, who saw her as nothing more than a tool for his revenge. But as she rode the subway home to the tiny apartment she shared with Oliver, she made herself a promise. She would endure whatever Damien Rhodes threw at her. She would survive his cruelty just as she had survived everything else. What neither of them knew, as they lay awake in their separate worlds that night, was that hatred and love are not opposites but neighbors, separated by the thinnest of walls. And walls, no matter how carefully built, eventually crumble. The first morning arrived with the weight of judgment. Nora stood outside Rhodes Tower at 7:30, wearing her only professional dress, a navy blue number she had found at a consignment shop, and altered herself. Her hands were steady as she pushed through the revolving doors, but her heart felt like a trapped bird beating against her ribs. Damien was already at his desk when she entered, and he looked up with those calculating eyes that seemed to measure her worth and find it lacking. He gestured to a corner desk position so she would face the wall while he could watch her every movement. Her first task was to reorganize 17 years of company documents by client name, then date, then project type, all before the end of the day. The stack of boxes reached nearly to her shoulder. "That's impossible to complete in 8 hours, Mr. Rhodes," she said calmly. "Then I suggest you work faster. Or perhaps you'd like to admit you're not capable of the job." His smile was a weapon designed to wound. "I'll manage," Nora replied, moving to the boxes. Hours melted into one another as she sorted through endless paperwork, her back aching and her vision blurring from reading small print. Damien left for meetings periodically, but each time he returned, he found something wrong. The labels were crooked. She had misfiled a document from 2019. Her handwriting was barely legible. Each criticism was delivered with cold precision, designed to chip away at her confidence. At noon, her stomach growled audibly. Damien glanced up from his laptop, one eyebrow raised. "Hungry? There's a cafe on the 3rd floor. You have 12 minutes. Nora rushed to the cafe, grabbed the cheapest sandwich and a coffee for Damien, black with no sugar as he had specified that morning. She made it back in 11 minutes. He took one sip of the coffee and grimaced. "This is undrinkable. Tomorrow, go to Martelli's Coffee House on 5th Avenue. They know how to make a proper espresso. And you'll still be back in 12 minutes. That's 8 blocks away, Mr. Rhodes. Then run." She returned to her filing, the sandwich sitting like lead in her stomach. But she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. As the days turned into weeks, a strange pattern emerged. Damien pushed her relentlessly, assigning impossible tasks and expecting perfection. Yet Nora never broke. When he demanded she prepare a 50-page presentation by morning, she worked through the night and delivered it flawlessly. When he sent her across town in rush-hour traffic to retrieve a document he claimed was essential, only to tell her he no longer needed it when she returned, she simply nodded and filed it away. Her quiet strength began to unsettle him in ways he didn't understand. He had expected her to quit, to cry, to beg for mercy. Instead, she endured with a dignity that reminded him uncomfortably of his own mother, who had faced poverty and shame without ever losing her grace. The shift began during a crisis 3 weeks into Nora's employment. A major investor threatened to pull out of a deal worth $200 million after discovering a potential security flaw in Rhodes Innovations' new software. Damien needed to prepare a comprehensive response by morning, complete with technical documentation, legal analysis, and financial projections. "You'll stay tonight," he told Nora at 6 o'clock. "We have work to do." "I need to pick up my son by 7, she said, pulling out her phone. "I can call my neighbor, ask her to keep him overnight, but I need to talk to him first." "Fine. 5 minutes. Damien didn't mean to eavesdrop, but his office was small enough that he couldn't help hearing her side of the conversation. "Oliver, sweetie, Mama has to work late tonight." "I know, baby, I know. I'll make it up to you this weekend, I promise." "Yes, we can go to the park. You be good for Mrs. Patterson, okay? I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Sweet dreams, my beautiful boy." When she hung up, her hand lingered on the phone, and Damien saw her blink rapidly, fighting back tears she refused to shed in front of him. They worked through the night, side by side for the first time. Nora proved to be remarkably intelligent, catching errors in the financial projections that even Damien had missed and suggesting alternative solutions he hadn't considered. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally caught up with both of them. "Why did your father do it?" Damien asked suddenly, the question escaping before he could stop it. Nora looked up from her laptop, surprised. "I don't know. He never explained. One day he was there, the next he was gone. He left a note saying he was sorry, that he had made terrible mistakes, but he never said what they were or why. My mother tried to find him, to understand, but he had vanished completely. We found out about the embezzlement from the police when they came to search our house." "You never heard from him again?" "Once. A letter arrived on my 18th birthday. He said he loved me, that everything he did was to protect me, but that I was better off without him. The letter was postmarked from somewhere in South America. That was 9 years ago. I haven't heard anything since." Damien studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but saw only exhaustion and old pain. "To protect you from what?" "I don't know. The letter didn't make sense. He talked about dangerous people, about debts he couldn't repay, about choosing the lesser evil. My mother thought he was trying to justify the unjustifiable, making himself the hero of a story where he was really the villain." Nora's voice cracked slightly. She died still loving him, still hoping he would come back and explain everything. That hope killed her more slowly than any disease could have. For the first time since discovering Nora's identity, Damien felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the first tiny crack in the wall of his hatred. This woman sitting across from him had lost as much as he had, maybe more. She had been a child, innocent and unaware, when their father's actions destroyed both their families. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said quietly, the word surprising them both. Nora looked at him with those tired green eyes. "And I'm sorry about your father, Mr. Rhodes. Truly sorry. I know my words can't change anything, but I am." They finished the presentation as dawn painted the windows gold. When Nora finally stood to leave, she swayed slightly, and Damien reached out instinctively to steady her. His hand on her arm created a moment of unexpected connection, a spark of something neither of them was prepared to name. "Get some rest," he said, releasing her quickly. "Be back at noon." "Yes, sir." After she left, Damien stood alone in his office, staring at the chair where she had sat. Something was changing, something he didn't understand and couldn't control. The hatred he had cultivated so carefully was developing hairline fractures, and through those cracks, something dangerous was beginning to seep in. Understanding. Empathy. And beneath it all, a attraction he absolutely refused to acknowledge. He had sworn to make her suffer, to extract payment for her father's crimes. But watching Nora work with quiet determination, listening to her speak with such obvious love to her son, seeing her endure his cruelty with unbroken dignity, Damien was starting to realize something terrifying. The person suffering most from his revenge might be himself. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning when Nora didn't show up for work. Damien found himself checking his watch repeatedly, a knot of concern forming in his stomach that he refused to acknowledge. At 8:30, he called her cell phone. No answer. At 9, he called again. Still nothing. By 9:30, his concern had transformed into something closer to panic, though he told himself it was simply annoyance at her unprofessional behavior. At 10 o'clock, his phone finally rang. Nora's voice was hoarse, fractured with exhaustion and fear. "Mr. Rhodes, I'm so sorry. I can't come in today. My son is in the hospital. I'll make up the hours, I promise. Please don't fire me." What happened? The question came out sharper than he intended, but underneath the harsh tone was genuine worry. "High fever, trouble breathing. They think it might be pneumonia. The doctors are running tests." Her voice broke. "I can't lose him. He's everything I have." "Which hospital?" "St. Catherine's, but Mr. Rhodes, you don't need to." He hung up before she could finish, grabbing his jacket and telling his secretary to clear his schedule. 20 minutes later, he walked into the pediatric ward of St. Catherine's Hospital, feeling distinctly out of place among the worried parents and cheerful murals of cartoon animals. He found Nora sitting beside a small bed where a dark-haired boy lay sleeping, an oxygen mask over his small face. She looked up when Damien entered, shock and confusion crossing her exhausted features. "What are you doing here?" Damien didn't have a good answer, so he deflected. "I needed to discuss the Morrison contract." "It can't wait." It was a transparent lie, and they both knew it. There was no Morrison contract. "Mr. Rhodes. How is he?" Nora looked back at her son, her hand gently smoothing the hair from his forehead. "Bacterial pneumonia. They've started antibiotics, but his fever isn't breaking yet. They say the next 24 hours are critical." Her voice trembled. "The treatment is expensive. I don't have insurance that covers all of this. I'll need to set up a payment plan, maybe take on extra work." "The company's insurance will cover it," Damien said abruptly. "You're a full-time employee. That includes comprehensive medical coverage for dependents. I've only been working for you for a month. Most policies have a waiting period. I own the company. I'll make an exception." Nora stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Why are you being kind to me? You hate me. You've made that very clear." Damien sat down in the chair across from her, suddenly exhausted. "I don't hate you, Nora. I thought I did, but I was wrong. I hated the memory of what happened to my family. I hated the helplessness I felt watching my father die. I hated Thomas Bennett so much that I convinced myself his daughter must be guilty too. But you're not your father any more than I am mine. Then why did you hire me? Why put me through all of this?" "Because I wanted revenge. I wanted someone to hurt the way I hurt. I wanted to feel powerful instead of powerless." He ran a hand through his hair. "I was wrong. I'm sorry, Nora. Truly sorry. Before Nora could respond, Oliver stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Mama? I'm here, baby. Nora moved to the edge of the bed, taking his small hand in hers. How do you feel? Tired. My chest hurts. I know, sweetheart. The medicine will make you feel better soon. Oliver's gaze drifted to Damien, curious despite his illness. Who's that? That's Mr. Rhodes. He's a friend. The word surprised both adults, but Nora didn't take it back. You look sad, Oliver said to Damien with the blunt honesty of children. Damien felt something crack inside his chest. This small boy, sick and vulnerable, was worried about a stranger's feelings. I'm feeling better now, he said softly. Over the next 2 days, Damien found himself returning to the hospital more often than necessary. He brought Nora coffee and food from the cafe downstairs, ensuring she ate when she forgot to. He sat with Oliver when Nora needed to rest, reading stories and talking about superhero cartoons. He watched Nora care for her son with such fierce love that it made his throat tight. On the 3rd day, Oliver's fever finally broke. The doctor declared him out of danger, and Nora sobbed with relief, her forehead pressed against her son's small hand. Damien stepped out of the room to give them privacy, but also because he needed a moment to compose himself. Later that evening, after Oliver fell into a peaceful sleep and the nurses had dimmed the lights, Nora found Damien in the family waiting area, staring out at the city lights. Thank you, she said quietly, sitting beside him. For everything. The insurance, the visits, just being here. I don't understand why, but thank you. I needed to see who you really were, Damien admitted. Not the daughter of my enemy, but Nora. Just Nora. A woman who works herself to exhaustion for her child, who faces cruelty with dignity, who never gives up no matter how hard things get. He turned to look at her. You're remarkable. I'm just a mother doing what mothers do. No, you're more than that. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Nora spoke again. There's something I need to tell you. About my father. I hired a private investigator last year, spent money I couldn't afford, because I needed to know the truth. He found something. Damien's attention sharpened. What? My father was being blackmailed. Someone discovered he had falsified documents years ago to get his position at your father's company. He had lied about his credentials, and someone threatened to expose him unless he helped them embezzle funds. My father refused at first, but then they threatened me and my mother. So he did what they asked, creating false accounts and transferring money. Who was blackmailing him? Jonathan Price. Your father's business partner. The name hit Damien like a physical blow. Jonathan Price, the man who had stood by his father's side for 20 years, who had helped build the company from nothing, who had comforted Damien's family after his father's death. Jonathan, who had conveniently bought the company's remaining assets at bankruptcy prices and later sold them for millions. The investigator found evidence that Price orchestrated everything. He used my father as a scapegoat, knowing that when the embezzlement was discovered, everyone would blame the man with the falsified credentials. My father ran because Price threatened to kill me if he didn't. He thought disappearing would keep me safe. Damien felt 17 years of hatred suddenly redirect, like a river finding a new channel. Why didn't you tell me this before? Would you have believed me? You hated me before you even knew my name. I needed proof, and I only got the full report last week. I was trying to figure out how to tell you when Oliver got sick. Do you still have the evidence? Copies of everything. Banking records, emails, even a recorded phone conversation the investigator obtained. It's all real, Damien. My father was a coward who made terrible choices, but he wasn't the monster you thought he was. And neither am I. Damien stood abruptly, pacing the small waiting room. His entire world was shifting, years of carefully constructed beliefs crumbling like sand. He had built his empire on anger, fueled his success with thoughts of revenge, and all of it was based on a lie. Jonathan Pryce had stolen from his family, killed his father, and then let another man take the blame. "I need to see that evidence," he said finally. "I'll send it to you tonight." He turned to face her, this woman he had tried so hard to hate, and saw her clearly for the first time. She wasn't his enemy. She was his mirror, another victim of the same man, carrying the same scars, fighting the same battles. They were both survivors of Jonathan Pryce's greed, both marked by losses neither of them deserved. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate but sincere. "For everything I put you through. For the cruelty, the impossible tasks, for making you suffer for crimes you never committed. I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try to make it right." Nora stood, closing the distance between them. "You've already started. You saved my son's life. That's worth more than any apology." They stood close enough that Damien could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, could smell the faint scent of her shampoo beneath the hospital antiseptic. Without thinking, he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate, so different from every interaction they had shared before. "I spent so long hating you," he whispered. "But I don't think I ever really did. I think I was afraid of what I might feel if I let myself see you as you really are." "And what do you feel now?" Damien leaned closer, giving her time to pull away, to stop what was about to happen. But Nora didn't move. Instead, she tilted her face up, her eyes fluttering closed. When their lips met, it wasn't the kiss of hatred he had imagined in his darkest moments of confusion. It was soft and sweet, filled with apology and forgiveness, with understanding and hope. It tasted like new beginnings, like walls crumbling and bridges being built. It was the kiss of two people who had suffered alone for too long, finally finding comfort in each other's arms. When they pulled apart, both breathing heavily, Damien rested his forehead against hers. "I don't know how to do this. How to be anything other than angry." "Then we'll learn together," Nora said softly. "One day at a time." From that moment forward, everything changed. Damien used the evidence Nora provided to expose Jonathan Pryce's crimes, bringing the man to justice after 17 years of freedom. The legal battle was long and brutal, but with each court appearance, Damien felt lighter, the burden of misplaced hatred finally lifting from his shoulders. Nora stayed on as his assistant, but their relationship transformed. The cruelty was replaced with kindness, the impossible tasks with genuine collaboration. Damien discovered that Nora had a brilliant mind for business, and he began involving her in major decisions. She discovered that beneath Damien's cold exterior was a man capable of great warmth, who read bedtime stories to Oliver with genuine enthusiasm and who looked at her like she was something precious. Healing, they learned, was not a destination but a journey, one they traveled together. And love, real love, wasn't about perfection or grand gestures. It was about choosing each other every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. 6 months later, standing in the park watching Oliver play, Damien took Nora's hand in his. "I spent so many years living in the past, letting anger define who I was. Thank you for showing me how to live in the present." Nora squeezed his hand, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me, for really seeing me, and choosing to love what you found." They had both lost so much, suffered wounds that would always leave scars. But in finding each other, they had discovered something stronger than hatred, something more powerful than revenge. They had found redemption, forgiveness, and the kind of love that heals from the inside out. And that, they both knew, was worth everything.